Hello, in this video we will tackle past 16 property, plant and equipment, past 20 government grants, past 23 borrowing costs, past 36 impairment of assets, and past 40 investment property. I am Nico Hiron, and these are my respective members.
I am Kay Abigail O. Garcia.
I am Hannah Gidukos.
I am Danielle G. Gonzalez.
I am Mariela Jane Kyogubi.
This is Group 4 of Module 6 Accounting for Investments. As aforementioned in this video, it is expected that we tackle investments. Personally, to invest is to generate profit. However, there are certain factors for investments, such as to invest in startups, to enter into a new industry. Another is to diversify your risk as an investor. Another is to earn a high rate of return by acknowledging the risk index and ignoring those higher ones. And of course, this is to secure operating arrangements as well as financing arrangements. Although these are the ways to invest, to engage in investment, in this module we will tackle how. How do we account for these investments? First, let's talk about the property, plant, and equipment. The following learning objectives are: first, understand the concept of recognition and measurement of property, plant, and equipment, investment property. Explain the accounting for depreciation of property, plant, and equipment, as well as investment property. Third, discuss the requirements for disclosures for property, plant, and equipment, and investment property. The following objectives are in line with the International Accounting Standard number 16, which is to prescribe the accounting treatment for property, plant, and equipment. However, please bear in mind that this standard is subject to such exceptions. Firstly, we do have property, plant, and equipment that is classified as held in accordance with International Financial Reporting Standard number 5, that non-current assets held for sale or the discontinued operations. Second, we do have biological assets related to agriculture activity other than bearer plans, which means they do not apply to the procedure on the bearer plans. Third, we have the recognition and measurement of exploration and evaluation assets, so they are not included as well. Lastly, we do have mineral rights and mineral reserves such as oil, natural gas, and similar non-regenerative resources, which are excluded from the standard itself. Just for the knowledge of everyone, this standard is being applied by entities for an annual period starting from the 1st of January 2005. Now, before we engage to the overall content or the body knowledge of this report or this module, let us encounter some of the terms to be defined for the clarity of its definition used in this module. First, we have the bearer plant. Bearer plant is basically the assets that are used in production or supply of agricultural produce, such as this wallpaper shown here. This is the plantation of coconut trees. Bearer plants basically bear produce for more than a period, and it has a remote likelihood of being sold.
The phrase is missing. Should there be anyone to volunteer, you can unmute your microphone and say the answer.
Next is the carrying amount. It refers to the amount of an asset that is in this equation, that is derived from this equation, which is the historical amount of the asset or historical value of the asset minus any accumulated depreciation. Tapos, i-minus din po natin ang impairment losses, accumulated impairment losses as well. Next to consider the defined terms is cost. Normally, it will be used as an expense, an operating expense. But in this case, in this module, cost is the cash or cash equivalents used or any fair value of other consideration in acquiring or constructing the asset of the time. So it is required by the International Financial Reporting Standard that construction may be included in the acquisition of the asset.
The phrase is missing. Should there be anyone to volunteer, you can unmute your microphone and say the answer.
Next is the fair value. The term fair value refers to the price that would be used or that would be received rather to sell an asset or paid to transfer a liability in an orderly transaction between market participants. So we only refer to market because it is the current value that is fair at the measurement time. So that is fair value. According to Fincyclopedia, it is stated that it is an alternative value for fair value of an asset. So ginagamit lang po natin ang entity-specific value when there is such specific case na the use of fair value cannot practically be the best base of value, as the factors that are specific to an entity and not available to other market participants. So when we don't have any best base value, then we can conclude that we should use an entity-specific value instead of fair value. Next, we have the recoverable amount. The recoverable amount is the greater of an asset's fair value less costs to sell or its value in use. This means that the concept essentially focuses on the greatest value that can be obtained from an asset either by selling it or using it. This is in contrary with the carrying amount. This is to show differences between the two, carrying and the recoverable amount.
Property, Plant and Equipment Philippine Accounting Standard Number 16. This is in page 311 book by Valix, chapter 15.
Property, plant, and equipment are held for use in production or supply of goods or services, for rental to others, or for administrative purposes, and are expected to be used during more than one period. So there are three components in the definition of property, plant, and equipment in accordance with PAS 16. First, they are tangible assets, meaning PPE items have physical substance. Second, they are used in the normal operations of the business, meaning they are used in the production or supply of goods or services for rental to others or for administrative purposes. So, for example, yung inyong factory, that is PPE. For example, you have a machinery that is for rent, that is also considered as PPE. The third component of the definition is they are long-term in nature, meaning they are expected to be used for more than 1 year. So the standard that governs the property, plant, and equipment is PAS 16. It lists down the classes of PPE that are governed by this standard. So first, we have land. Remember that land is not being computed for depreciation kasi hindi naman po nag-depreciate ang land. Actually, siya pa nga po ay nag-appreciate due to appraisals. And then we also have land improvements. Pag sinabi naman po nating land improvements, yun po yung mga pinapalagay niyong bagong pavements or fences. So, although land is not depreciable, lagi po nating tatandaan na ang land improvements ay depreciable. And then, we also have building. If the building is being acquired or constructed by a company at sa kanila talaga yon, then that is also part of their PPE. But remember that if the building or maybe the office space is only rented by the company, then they will be simply recording rent expense for that, and it can be recorded as their asset because the ownership is not theirs. And then we also have machinery. This is very prevalent in manufacturing companies, which uses machineries that are capital intensive in terms of usage. When we say capital intensive po, it's more on machines. Kapag naman po labor intensive, more on people yung gumagawa. And next one, if the company owns a ship or yate, that's also included. Maybe they use this for shipping their products or anything. And then if the company owns also an aircraft, then that's also part of their PPE as long as it would qualify sa ating definition ng PPE. We also have furniture and fixtures. Lahat ng office chairs and tables, kasama po yan sa ating PPE. And then, office equipment like computer, photocopying machines, and any other equipment na more than 1 year nagagamit ng company. And then we have patterns, molds, and dies. So most probably, this will be more applicable sa mga manufacturing companies. Magagamit nila sa production of goods, yan. And we also have tools. We can also consider this as property, plant, and equipment. Basta more than 1 year ginagamit ng company. And then there are plants. Examples po nito ay yung mga trees na hindi lang one time yung pagbubunga niya. Like coconut trees or mga puno ng mangga. So, yun po yung mga PPE that should be accounted for using PAS 16. However, there are items that PAS 16 should not be applied to. And these are, first, those that are classified as held for sale, and they are accounted for under PFRS 5. Next is biological assets, except of course beer plants, which are accounted for using PAS 41. Exploration and evaluation assets accounted for under PFRS 6. Mineral rights and reserves such as oil or gas, land held for undetermined use for capital appreciation, and land held by a real estate developer. If you are a real estate developer and you sell land, then these are considered as held for sale in the normal course of the business, and it should be accounted for using PAS 2 because technically yun po yung inventory. So how do we recognize PPE items? An item of property, plant, and equipment shall be recognized as asset only if it meets these two criteria. First, it is probable that future economic benefits associated with the asset will flow to the entity. And second, the cost of the asset can be measured reliably. So in this slide, we will be focusing on the measurement of the property, plant, and equipment. When we talk about measurement, you need to remember two things. First is the initial measurement. Second is the subsequent measurement. So how do we measure property, plant, and equipment? Initially, PPE should be measured at cost. Cost is the amount of cash or cash equivalent paid and the fair value of the other consideration given to acquire an asset at the time of acquisition or construction. So what comprise the initial cost of an item of property, plant, and equipment? There are three components in the initial cost of the PPE. First, purchase price. Second, directly attributable cost. Third, estimated cost of dismantling. So, ano nga ba yung mga pasok sa purchase price? First, invoice price. Second, import duties. So, when you import your PPE items from abroad, there are import duties and it should be included in the cost of the PPE. Third, non-refundable purchase taxes. So, yung VAT or value-added tax is a refundable purchase tax. Kaya, hindi siya included sa cost ng PPE. And then, minus trade discounts and rebates. So, pag mayroong mga trade discounts for short-term financing and if there are rebates, we deducted. So, for directly attributable cost naman, these are costs necessary to bring the asset to the location and condition intended by the management. Included dito yung freight or shipping cost, yung insurance during shipping, basta all costs necessary to bring it to the location and to the condition intended. The cost of dismantling naman are the costs for dismantling and removing the item and restoring the site on which it is located. For this cost, we estimate this because this is a future cost. I-estimate natin siya. Normally, we get the present value and corresponding liability is credited for this cost. But the estimated dismantling cost is capitalized sa initial cost ng PPE. Now, what are directly attributable costs? So, bukod sa purchase price at sa estimated cost of dismantling, ito po ang iba pang examples ng directly attributable cost in bringing the asset into its present location and condition intended for use of the management. We have cost of employee benefit arising directly for the construction or acquisition of an item of property, plant, and equipment. Most especially sa ating pong PPE na constructed. Kasi po, syempre, magpapasahod ka ng employee na nag-construct ng building or equipment. So, basically, that's part of the PPE. We also have the cost of site preparation. Parang when you prepare the site para malagyan mo siya ng PPE mo, parang ganun. We also have initial delivery and handling costs. So, nandiyan po yung freight, And installation and assembly costs. Siyempre, papa-assemble mo, papa-install mo. May bayad rin po ang installation. Kasama yon. And professional fees. In any case that the company hired some architects or engineers, because without the knowledge and the expertise of architect and or engineers, the asset will not be completed. And then, cost of testing, whether the asset is functioning properly. Testing cost, kasama po yun. Pero we will be deducting any proceeds from sales. So, ano naman po yung mga hindi natin dapat isama sa cost ng PPE? First, cost of opening a new facility. Second, introduction of a new product or service, because those are more on advertising and promotion. So, that's more of a marketing expense. And then, conducting business in a new location or with a new class of customer, including cost of staff training. So, nag-change ka lang naman ng business location, so that's not a part of a cost of PPE. And then, any administrative and other general overhead costs, which is usually forms part of your expenses. Like, for example po, sa mga manufacturing type of business. And then, costs incurred while an item capable of operating in the manner intended has yet to be brought into use or is operated at less than full capacity. And then, initial operating loss and cost of relocating or reorganizing part of all of an entity's operation. Now, paano naman po yung recognition of indirect costs? So, items of property, plant, and equipment may be acquired for safety or environmental reasons. The acquisition of such property, plant, and equipment, although not directly increasing the future economic benefits of any particular existing item of PPE, may be necessary for an entity to obtain the future economic benefits from its other assets. So now, how do we recognize indirect costs subsequently? So, subsequent expenditure on an item of PPE occurs after the initial recognition of the item. Entities need to evaluate such subsequent expenditure to determine if it will generate future economic benefit for the entity. So, it is likely that expenditure would generate future economic benefit for the entity if the purpose of the subsequent expenditure on an item of PPE is for, first, day-to-day servicing. An entity does not recognize in the carrying amount of an item of property, plant, and equipment the cost of the day-to-day servicing of the item, because the purpose of these expenditures is often described as for the repairs and maintenance, like the cost of labor and consumables, and may include the cost of small parts, and these costs are expensed through profit and loss. Second, replacement parts. Parts of some items of property, plant, and equipment may require replacement at regular intervals or acquired to make a less frequently recurring replacement. An entity recognizes in the carrying amount of an item of property, plant, and equipment the cost of replacing part of such an item when the cost is incurred provided that the recognition criteria are met. And lastly, major inspections. Costs incurred for major inspections for faults, regardless of whether parts of the item are replaced, are recognized to the carrying amount of the item of property, plant, and equipment. Any remaining carrying amount of the cost of the previous inspection is derecognized. This occurs regardless of whether the cost of the previous inspection was identified in the transaction in which the item was acquired or constructed. So, what if there is a deferred settlement? Or what if utang yung binili mong PPE? So, if it is a deferred settlement, we use a cash price equivalent or yung present value ng deferred payments at the recognition date. So, first, kapag may given na cash price equivalent, use that. Pag wala naman, we get the present value of your deferred or future payment. The difference between the total amount paid and the cash price equivalent or the present value shall be recognized as interest expense. This is in accordance with IAS 23 borrowing costs, which will be discussed later. What if there is an exchange of assets or barter? So how do we account for exchange of assets? An entity may opt to exchange non-monetary assets like, for example, all equipment for new equipment or one asset to another asset. Like land, papalitan mo ng machinery, ganun. The cost of such an item of property, plant, and equipment is measured at fair value unless the exchange transaction lacks commercial substance, or the fair value of neither the asset received nor the asset given up is reliably measurable. Exchange of assets might have commercial substance or no commercial substance. So, kailan po natin masasabi na ang exchange transaction ay may commercial substance? An entity determines whether an exchange transaction has commercial substance by considering the extent to which its future cash flows are expected to change as a result of the transaction. An exchange transaction is considered to have commercial substance if the configuration, like risk, timing, and amount of the cash flows of the asset received differs from the configuration of the cash flows of the asset transferred, or the entity's specific value of the portion of the entity's operation affected by the transaction changes as a result of the exchange, and the difference in letter A or B is significance relative to the fair value of the asset exchange. So how do we reliably measure the fair value of an asset? So first, if the variability in the range of reasonable fair value measurement is not significant for that asset, or if the probabilities of the various estimates within the range can be reasonably assessed and used when measuring fair value. If an entity is able to measure reliably the fair value of either the asset received or the asset given up, then the fair value of the asset given up is used to measure the cost of the asset received unless the fair value of the asset received is more clearly evident.